So in this video, we're going to be going over exactly how we do our database planning process and how we set up our template before we add it into Bubble. So the first step that we do before every single build is we actually go through the process of planning how our database is going to be set up. And we use Google Sheets to actually set this up instead of doing it in the Bubble editor, just because it gives us a really nice overview and easy way to start changing information and thinking about the relationships between our data types. So what we do is we'll grab out the user stories or the scope document, which really defines what needs to be done on our application. And using that information, we'll start to think through the database and what actually needs to be captured and saved on our application, or what needs to be displayed to the end user, and what data types, data fields are required to support this. And then also, what relationships do we need between the data types just to really make our application work? And this planning process really helps us to anticipate and find solutions to the more complex development challenges and some of the more complex relationships that we need to set up between the data types. So on the screen here, what I want to do is I just want to show you how this database template structure in Google Sheets really works. So on the left-hand side here, we have the data type. So this just has a list of all the data types on our application. And the example that we see on the screen is just of a Facebook-esque platform. So on this left-hand side, you have the user data type, the university data type, the post data type. So we just have a list of all the data types. Then we have all the fields that we need to capture for every single data type. Then we actually have the type itself. So is it a text? Is it an image? Is it a yes or no field? And then you can see here in the red, we have the university data type. So what it's actually referring to is we pop in red when we have a relationship between two data types. So here we have the university on the user, which refers to this university data type. So by putting it on the red, it just allows us to recognize that this is a relationship in our database. And we can call out and think about how we should link the different relationships or the different data types together. Next, we have, is this a list? So if it is a list, we pop in yes, so that we're just aware that when we add it into Bubble, that's something we need. Then we also have public. So what we are actually doing is if we don't want a field to be public, so it needs to be private and it requires privacy rules, we'll just note this here. So for example, we don't want anyone to know which user is the app owner. So what this is really making me understand is that there is a privacy requirement. So there is a need to hide this information. So I just have to be aware that I need to set up a privacy rule and then just start to think about, okay, how will this privacy rule affect my data types and my fields? So it's just really important to have that awareness. The next one we have here is the notes. So this just has some further information about why we set up a particular field or what we were just really thinking about that data field and context when we set it up. So it's really helpful for us to write this, because then if we ever go back to our database, we know what we were thinking when we set up this field. And what we always try to do is we actually want to add these notes into our database as comments. So if I jump over to my editor and for example here, we can just add a note in like this. So you always want to add in those notes from our Google Sheet just into our database, so it's all saved and captured in one place. And the value of really setting up our spreadsheet in this way is that we think through the relationships and think through our database and the context before we start. So it means we really have that solid foundation to start building logic and functionality on top of. Once the database is ready, we just want to add all this information into Bubble.